The rain that had brought Brian and Lydia together, that unforgettable evening, became the beginning of something neither of them could explain. From that day forward, Brian no longer visited Sunrise Restaurant simply because he loved the tea and chapati. He went because of Lydia. Every morning, she greeted him with the same warm smile that somehow made every stressful day feel easier. "Good morning, Brian." "Good morning, Lydia." "What will it be today?" "You already know." The usual. The usual. They laughed. Soon, every breakfast became longer than the previous one. Instead of rushing to the office, Brian would arrive 30 minutes earlier just to spend more time talking to Lydia before the morning rush began. Sometimes they talked about football, sometimes politics, sometimes their childhood memories. Sometimes they simply laughed over silly jokes. It amazed Brian how easy it was to talk to her. One Saturday afternoon, Brian called Lydia. "Are you free tomorrow? I finish work at 3. I was wondering if you'd like to go somewhere." "Where?" "It's a surprise." Lydia smiled. "I'll trust you." The following afternoon, Brian picked her up wearing a crisp navy blue shirt and khaki trousers. Lydia wore a simple floral dress with white sandals. She looked effortlessly beautiful. "Wow," Brian whispered. "What?" "You look amazing." Lydia blushed. "Thank you." Brian drove toward Karara Forest, one of Nairobi's most peaceful places. Tall trees stretched high into the sky, while birds sang softly from every direction. They walked slowly along the nature trails. For the first time, Lydia felt completely relaxed. She didn't have to carry food trays. She didn't have to answer impatient customers. She could simply enjoy herself. Brian bought 2 cups of coffee. They sat on a wooden bench, overlooking a small waterfall. "What was your dream when you were little?" Brian asked. Lydia smiled. "I wanted to become a hotel manager." "What happened?" "My father died." Brian became quiet. "My mother couldn't afford university, so I studied hospitality in college instead. And now, I still dream." Brian looked at her. "What do you dream about now?" She laughed softly. "Owning my own business someday." "What kind?" "Maybe a grocery store." Brian smiled. "I think you'd make a great businesswoman." She laughed. "Really? You already know how to treat customers." Weeks became months. They explored Nairobi together. Sometimes they visited Uhuru Park. Sometimes they watched movies. Sometimes they simply walked around shopping malls without buying anything. Their favorite date was sitting in a quiet cafe sharing one slice of chocolate cake because neither of them wanted to spend too much money. Brian admired that Lydia wasn't interested in expensive gifts. She appreciated simple moments. One evening, while watching the sunset over Ngong Hills, Brian finally admitted something to himself. He wasn't simply attracted to Lydia. He was deeply in love. One evening after dropping Lydia home, Brian couldn't sleep. He kept replaying every conversation they had shared. Her laughter, her kindness, her humility. He picked up his phone and called his older sister, Grace. "I think I've met someone." Grace laughed. "You finally sound serious." "I am." "So when are you bringing her home?" Brian smiled. "This Sunday." Sunday arrived. Brian drove Lydia to his family home. She looked nervous. "What if your family doesn't like me?" "They'll love you." "But I'm just a waitress." Brian stopped walking. He gently held her hands. "Lydia." She looked into his eyes. "You are not just a waitress. You are the kindest woman I've ever met. You respect people. You work hard. You support your family. That's worth more than any job title." Lydia's eyes filled with tears. "No one has ever said that to me." Brian's mother welcomed Lydia with a warm embrace. "My son has told us so much about you." Lydia smiled shyly. "I hope only the good things." Everyone laughed. The afternoon was filled with stories, laughter, and delicious homemade food. Brian's younger cousins quickly surrounded Lydia. Within an hour, they already adored her. As they prepared to leave, Brian's mother quietly pulled him aside. "Son." "Yes, Mom." "Don't let this one go." Brian smiled. "I don't intend to." A week later, Lydia invited Brian to meet her family in Nairi. The journey through the green tea plantations was breathtaking. Her mother welcomed Brian warmly. Although they lived modestly, they treated him like family. Lydia's younger brother proudly showed Brian his school certificates. "I want to become an engineer." Brian smiled. "You will." That evening, they all sat outside watching the sunset over the hills. Brian admired the simplicity of their lives. No luxury. No wealth. Just genuine love. As they drove back to Nairobi, Brian couldn't stop smiling. "I understand now." "What?" "Why you're such a wonderful person." Lydia looked confused. "Your family." A month later, Brian had already made up his mind. He wanted to spend the rest of his life with Lydia. He secretly contacted her closest friends. He booked a rooftop restaurant overlooking Nairobi's glittering skyline. The evening arrived. Soft violin music filled the air. Candles flickered across the tables. Lydia admired the beautiful city lights. "This place is incredible." "I'm glad you like it." As dessert arrived, Brian suddenly stood up. Lydia looked surprised. "Brian." He reached into his jacket pocket. Her heart began racing. Customers nearby noticed what was happening. The restaurant became unusually quiet. Brian slowly knelt on one knee. "Lydia Wanjiku." Tears immediately filled her eyes. "You came into my life when I wasn't looking for love. You've shown me kindness, patience, honesty, and peace. You make every ordinary day feel extraordinary. I don't promise a perfect life, but I promise to stand beside you, to protect you, to respect you, to love you every single day." He opened the small velvet box. Inside sparkled a beautiful engagement ring. "Lydia, will you marry me?" Lydia covered her mouth as tears streamed down her cheeks. For several emotional seconds, she couldn't speak. Finally, she nodded. "Yes." The restaurant erupted into applause. Brian slipped the ring onto her finger. They embraced tightly, while everyone around them clapped and cheered. Neither of them knew that this beautiful love story was only beginning, and that years later, fate would test their marriage in ways neither of them could have imagined. 3 months after their engagement, wedding preparations were in full swing. Lydia wanted a simple ceremony. Brian insisted she deserved something unforgettable. Every weekend, they visited venues, met decorators, tasted cakes, and laughed over endless decisions about flowers, colors, and music. Lydia chose elegant white roses with touches of gold. Brian joked that choosing flowers was harder than choosing a wife. "You've already chosen the wife," Lydia teased. "Now survive choosing the flowers." The wedding was held on a bright Saturday morning in a beautiful garden on the outskirts of Nairobi. Guests arrived dressed in colorful African attire and elegant suits. Soft gospel music filled the air as friends and family took their seats. When Lydia stepped out of the bridal car in her flowing white gown, a hush fell over the crowd. She looked radiant. Brian, waiting at the altar, could hardly believe his eyes. As she walked toward him, he whispered to himself, "She's the most beautiful woman I've ever seen." The ceremony was filled with heartfelt vows. "I promise to love you in joy and in hardship," Brian said. "I promise to stand beside you through every season of life," Lydia replied. When the pastor finally declared them husband and wife, cheers erupted. The reception was filled with dancing, laughter, delicious food, and heartfelt speeches. Neighbors, relatives, and friends all agreed on one thing: they are made for each other. From that day on, Brian and Lydia became known as the couple everyone admired. People often said, if love has a face, it looks like Brian and Lydia. Little did they know that admiration would one day turn into whispers of heartbreak. The first 2 years of marriage were everything Brian and Lydia had dreamed of. They rented a cozy home in a quiet Nairobi neighborhood. Every morning, Lydia woke before sunrise to prepare breakfast while Brian got ready for work. Before leaving, he would kiss her forehead and say, "Have a beautiful day." She always smiled and replied, "Come home safely." In the evenings, they cooked dinner together, laughed over funny television shows, and planned for the future. Every month, they set aside part of Brian's salary into a savings account. "Our dream house," Brian would say. "And one day, our children," Lydia would add with a hopeful smile. They weren't rich, but they were content. Neighbors admired their respect for one another. Whenever someone needed help moving furniture, Brian volunteered. Whenever a sick neighbor needed food, Lydia prepared a warm meal. Their kindness earned them the love and respect of the entire community. On weekends, they attended church together, visited their parents, and occasionally enjoyed simple dates at cafes or parks. One evening, sitting on their balcony under the stars, Brian held Lydia's hand. "Promise me something." "What is it?" "No matter what happens, let's never stop talking to each other." Lydia smiled warmly. "I promise." He kissed her hand gently. Neither of them realized how precious that promise would become. Because in the months ahead, success, temptation, and pride would slowly begin to change Brian. The man who once couldn't wait to come home would soon begin looking for every excuse to stay away. And the perfect marriage everyone admired would start to crack.